Now, in London, at least 2 people were stabbed in what police are calling a terror-related incident. A man believed to be the attacker was fatally shot by armed officers at the scene. This all unfolded in a neighborhood in the southern part of London at about 2 p.m. local time. Now, according to our partners with the BBC, patients were being treated by doctors at the scene. Their conditions, we don't know right now. Police say the scene has been fully contained. And for more, let's bring in Richard Walton. He's on the phone. He is the former head of the counterterrorism at Scotland Yard and a CBS News consultant. Richard, thanks for joining us. What are authorities looking at right now?
Well, the authorities are declared this as a terrorist incident, and that's quite unusual for the Metropolitan Police to actually declare an incident as terrorist-related so early on in it. Which is of interest. And we believe 3 people have been stabbed, and it's not known the condition of those 3. And it's also believed that the terrorist involved has been shot by police and has been killed by police. So that's what the situation is at the moment.
Based on your experience, since police pretty quickly said that this person that this was a terror attack, do you believe that the attacker was known by police and authorities, or do you think that this may have been a lone wolf?
It's very difficult to speculate at this stage, although I would say that the immediacy of the police response by the plainclothes armed officers tends towards a hypothesis that the police were engaged in some kind of operation to do with this, and they were actually somewhere in the vicinity. But got to be very careful not to speculate too much. But obviously, it's very important that to understand the condition of those who've been involved in this stabbing. And I should say that this is the second terrorist attack of a similar kind in 2 months now. We had one back in November. You'll recall where a former released terrorist stabbed several people, killing 2 young people. And so the Met Police have had to deal with 2 terrorist incidents now in 2 months. And
Richard, kind of talk us through this here, because we hear the previous terror attacks have been in high traffic areas, high tourist areas. What about this part in South London? Describe the area to us.
So Streatham is a suburb of London. It's not of any great note. There's nothing that's particularly historic there. It's not the centre part of London, so there's not any iconic buildings of any note there. So it's the high street of Streatham, which again is of interest. So it tends to suggest that the attacker has either been spontaneous or something has triggered his rampage, as it were. But doesn't look on the face of it that he's actually been targeting a particular iconic building or part of central London, which would, be a tourist area or an area of where a lot of people were assembling.
There are always protocols to an investigation. So moving forward, based on your experience, what are investigators going to be looking at, and how are they going to move the investigation forward?
Well, the most critical thing at this time will be to determine whether this was an individual operating on his own, or whether he was accompanied by others, or whether there are others in the background, whether he's part of a cell that they might be planning further attacks. Obviously, if this was a covert counterterrorism operation and the police had already had some surveillance on this individual, then they will already know his status and know whether others are involved, so there may be further arrests to come. But the most critical thing for public safety is to determine, was he acting alone or was he with others?
London has seen a number of attacks like this in recent years, as you mentioned. How has that changed police response and how they try to prevent these attacks?
Well, the police in London, as you're probably aware, are not routinely armed. Only 10% of the London's Met Police is actually armed at any one time. So, but the armed response officers tend to be trained to a very high standard. And so they patrol around London in armed response vehicles, and they're called to incidents. But obviously they do get involved in pre-planned covert operations as well. But if you take the first London Bridge attack, a couple of years ago, the armed response to that was also very, very fast, and 3 of the terrorists were killed in under 8 minutes from the start of the incident to the end. So the Met's response has been very, very good over the last few years, and obviously they have upskilled and increase the number of armed response officers. But ordinary police officers are not routinely armed.
Richard Walton, the former head of counterterrorism for Scotland Yard, joining us on the phone. Richard, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Emma.